Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you're listening to this. Welcome to Screenland. My name is Brian Lloyd. Big one this week. I say big one. It's a big movie out this week. We may as well just crack right into it. Before all that, hi, how are you? How are things? What have you been up to? Any news? How did that thing pan out? Did you go see that thing? What did you think of it? Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah, it was not. Yeah. Okay, enough of all that. Let's talk about Wicked. Specifically, Wicked for Good. Now, I'm gonna. Oh, okay, right. I will start off and readily admit to you, musicals, not a fan. Shock horror, I hear you say. I have a reason, though. I do have a reason. I have a reason, and it's mainly due to the fact that I feel that musicals, and this is like, again, sweeping generalizations here, right? We should just call this podcast Sweeping Generalizations. But specifically when it comes to musicals, is that they are very much, it's all sort of, it's maximalist. You know what I mean? It's right there. It's right in your face. They are literally singing and dancing their feelings and emotions. There is, and that, I think it's, now I'm going to get kind of blind boy on this. I think it's why musicals and show tunes and all the rest of it are kind of like specifically an American art form, right? Now I'm going to get really fucking bad here. Because I think they are shallow. I think musicals have a depth problem to them. Everything's right on the surface. You know what I mean? It's right there. You don't have to think too hard about it. You don't have to push too hard to understand any of it. It's right there. Now, you could look at Wicked for Good and say, oh, well, this is actually about, what's going on in America and how, the descent into fascism and this idea of demonizing people and, using people as scapegoats to advance, political change and all the rest of it. But, again, what the fuck does it say about America that you have to have an all-singing, all-dancing musical where people are locked in cages and, propaganda? You have to have all that to be like, yeah, that's bad. Here, look, we've put it into a musical form so you'll get it. Do you know what I mean? And of course, look, obviously Wicked was around long before fucking this sort of descent into fascism in America. But, I've always had trouble with musicals. It's not to say that I don't love some songs from them. Like I've said before, the big ones, sure. Grease, Hopelessly Devoted to You by Olivia Newton-John. I mean, that is a fucking song. Do You Hear the People Sing from Les Mis? Great track. You know what I mean? Really, fuck if that doesn't get the juices going, But largely it's just, I don't know, it's just so kind of just there. Just right there. And again, I know people like them. I know I'm probably in the minority here. Or at the very least, I don't know. It didn't. And yet then again, I can look at something like Muppet Christmas Carol and say that's incredible. And it is incredible. And you would describe that as a musical. Kind of. I don't know. At any rate, going into Wicked for Good, my shields were up. I was already kind of being like, all right. Yeah, fine. I dressed up as Alphabet in Ireland AM, and there was talk that I was going to have to dress up as Glinda for this week's episode. Thankfully, that didn't happen. Not that I have anything wrong with wearing a woman's dress. It's just, it's very hard. It's happened a couple of times where they've dressed me up as stuff, and then I've gone out and said, yeah, the film sucks. I had to do Gladiator 2 dressed as a gladiator on Ireland AM. And then I had to be like, yeah, the film's not that good. It's, it's kind of, I think Paul Mescal is miscast, yada, yada, yada. All while wearing a cheap Roman costume. And then even in Wicked, like I was literally, they painted my face green to make me look like Elphaba. And I was like, yeah, look, musicals do nothing for me. But, I can really see why this is a big blockbuster musical. And, trying to talk about everything else except the fact that it did nothing for me whatsoever. So, like, I'm kind of glad that they didn't dress me up for this week. So, like, the story is, like, half of it is set. It's just very, very difficult to kind of grab onto something. You're just you're getting the big beats. You're getting the big emotional beats. And you can kind of like tie in, when it goes back to, The Wizard of Oz and Dorothy and the house dropping on the Wicked Witch of the East and stuff. It gets very, and then like there's the whole bit with like the silver shoes turn red and all the rest of it. Like, it's very awkward. You can see that they're trying to crowbar everything in. The film, I guess what I'm getting at is that it's overstuffed. There is no room for any kind of subtlety to get in. There's no room for any sort of, I don't know, moment to let it breathe. It's just on to the next song. It's on to the next thing. It's all rah, 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 rah. It's all maximalist. And again, and this is like, the problems I have with Wicked for Good are the problems I have with musicals writ large, which is that it's just so in your face. It's just so right there. And some people love that, that kind of way. I can appreciate why people like that, because it's just so there. It's so pushing further and further into your face. And again, some people like that. I don't. I kind of would rather have to walk out to a movie than have a movie walk right up to my face, if you get my meaning. And I don't know why that is. I mean, I could sit here and try to psychoanalyze it, but I'm not gonna. But, I'm sure if there's a psychiatrist listening to this, they're like, oh yeah, that's why. But it's just, look, it looks great. I'll say that. The production design in this is great. It really feels like an old school musical. Like, there's a lot of key lighting in it. There's the big dancing set pieces. You can feel the sets. You know what I mean? When you watch some movies, like, or even like watch, like, the biggest culprit for this is The Mandalorian, where you can tell exactly where the wall of the volume is when you're watching it, because it's got this flatness. Whereas I think in Wicked, you can tell that the set was built. Yeah, fine, there might be like green screen beyond a certain point, but like you can feel that it has a tactile nature. And the songs are good. Like, For Good is nice, and Cynthia Erivo, she's fantastic. I remember seeing her in what was it, Bad Times at the El Royale, and like, talk about a calling card. The last time I saw something like that, a calling card performance, was Daniel Craig in Layer Cake. And I remember watching that movie and being like, that guy is gonna be fucking huge. He's gonna be famous. And I remember watching Bad Times at the El Royale, and Cynthia Erivo was in it. I saw her in Widows as well. And both times it was like, I can't keep my eyes off her. She's fantastic. And she is the best thing about this. She is brilliant in this. She will definitely get nominated for Best Actress. If the buzz on Hamnet is true, it's going to be Jessie Buckley's year, whatever the case may be. I don't know. I still haven't seen Hamnet yet. But she's brilliant in it. She's fantastic in it. Cynthia Erivo, is it worth the price of admission? Yeah, maybe. I fucking love that clip of her talking about the thong song. And I've seen her do an interview. I think I've seen her on Drew O'Rafalu's podcast as well. Like, she seems like such good crack. I want her to do well. And Ariana Grande as well seemed funny as well, and Jonathan Bailey, again, like, everyone, it's very well cast, obviously. It's obviously very well cast. But it's like, it all feels very surface level. It all feels very much right on the cusp, and you can poke your finger right through it. But look, ultimately, not that it ever did. This is going to be huge. I mean, this is going to be a blockbuster. This is going to do silly money. People are going to be watching this. Like, I remember even on the run up to it, I had about 3 or 4 people saying, "Hey, listen, can you get me tickets to the premiere of that?" Like, that never happens. That never ever happens. So, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's just musicals, man. They just do nothing for me. Wonderful little bit of counter-programming going on in the next one. Sisu, Road to Revenge, directed by Jalmari Helander. I interviewed him for the first one back in entertainment days, and I am telling you, right, like, it was honestly, I think, one of the worst interviews I ever did, because, and I don't think this is, again, sweeping generalizations. Let's just call this episode Sweeping Generalizations. Finnish people are quite taciturn. They are quite taciturn. They don't really talk that much. That's kind of their thing. And trying to get the director of Sisu and Sisu Road to Revenge to talk about anything. And I mean fucking, he made the film. And I was like going in being like, John Wick, obviously this kind of heightened action, blah, 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 blah. What's your take on it? And he gave me nothing. And like, the thing about, again, this is my experience from doing lots of these junkets. I've always found the directors are the ones to talk to, because they will give you everything you ask. They are actually interested to know what you have to say. And, they're not guarded in the way that actors are. Like, you go in and do these junkets with actors, they generally tend to be very, very trained. They know exactly what they're going to say. And, ultimately, it doesn't matter how fucking well prepared I am. It doesn't matter how good I think my questions are, or how much research I do. The sheer volume of interviews that they do, they've already been asked that question before. Better or worse, I don't know, but they've been asked that question before. So every answer you get is always going to sound like it's rehearsed. Whereas directors, I think, even when it's a question that they've talked about again and again and again, they will preface it by saying, "Oh yeah, I've talked about this already, but yada yada yada." And it's why I've always preferred interviewing directors. Always. I've had so much more fulfilling and engaging and entertaining interviews with directors than I've had with actors. There are the exceptions, John Cena being one. I bring this all up because Sisu Road to Revenge is a great piece of counter-programming to Wicked for Good, in that, first of all, it's 87 minutes long. Second of all, this is about as lean and sparse as you can get in an action movie. It is so simple, and I love simple action movies. Give me a concept that I can describe in 30 seconds or less, and then go. John Wick. Killer assassin's dog dies, goes on a kill crazy rampage to get revenge. Also a metaphor for him not dealing with grief. Sisu, Road to Revenge. Man returns from war, finds his wife and children have been killed. Breaks down the house that he lives in, tries to move on with his life, but the past keeps coming back to him in the form of Stephen Lang and a terrible Russian accent. Now, I love Stephen Lang. Stephen Lang, I'm talking about interviews. Stephen Lang is a dude I interviewed. I interviewed him for a terrible film called Mortal Engines. It was fucking awful. He was great. I could have spent hours with him. It was me and him and Hugo Weaving. And we ended up talking about like fucking, what did we end up talking about? Like Outlaw Josie Wales. Talked about like, you know, theatre acting and working with CGI, and like, you know, is CGI like kind of like black box theatre acting? Is it, you know, that kind of experimental, or is it really just trying to kind of find a way in, whatever way you can do it and stuff? Great interview. I loved him. He was great. And I think he's an actor that, you know, I mean, you know, I think of him in like Tombstone, right? And he's brilliant in Tombstone. Like, in Tombstone is one of those films that there are so many, like, everyone talks about, you know, Val Kilmer for good reason. Everyone talks about, you know, Sam Elliott and fucking Michael Biehn, you know what I mean, as Johnny Ringo, and Powers Booth. Like Tombstone is a great movie for actors. Really, really good actors in a genre setting. And I've always found that, you know, an actor's actor in a genre setting, they can really fucking do great things. Bill Camp is another one. Take your pick of any stuff he's been in, like Presumed Innocent, the TV show, not the film. And this is another example of, you know, a really deep thinking actor in a very dumb kind of bag of hammers movie. Dumb as a bag of hammers movie, but finding texture and finding tone and finding little pieces to kind of spin off and do little weird little stuff with it. And he's great in it. He's like, there's a scene with him and the main guy, who is called Jalmari, I think I'm pronouncing that right, where he talks about how, and it's like a 2-minute scene, yet it has so much about the world that they live in, that these are two men of absolute violence, and that it has just come to define all of what they are, and that there's nothing else there. There's nothing underneath except, you know, want and greed. And, you know, they do all that in 2 minutes. In 2 fucking minutes. You get this entire world that you're able... And again, this is what I'm talking about with musicals, is in that in this film, you have to walk out to meet it. Whereas in Wicked for Good and for musicals, generally, they come right to your face. They come right up against you. And, you know, yeah, it's great. The action set pieces are done really, really well. There's an extended chase sequence in this that is basically like taken straight from Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, where he's on a truck and there's bikers, and, you know, then there's another scene on a set on a train where he's trying to sneak through a load of Soviet soldiers while he's trying to get to Stephen Lang, and it's becomes this real kind of like all about sound design, and he's trying to creep past them and stuff. And yeah, and again, it's like 87, 89 minutes long, and it fits all this like depth and texture. You know, there's stuff about like, you know, the end of World War II and how the Soviet Union took over parts of Finland, you know, Kaliningrad and all the rest of it. And how, you know, Finnish people just had to leave their homes, and most of them, none of them ever went back. And the main character is trying to do is essentially get the wood of his home and bring it back to Finland. And even like the final scene is him building the log cabin. I mean, I'm gonna spoil it for you now, but he survives and he's trying to build the cabin, and this group of men arrive, and he's got this axe in his hand, and they're all like, "We're just looking for work. We'll help." And they don't have to say anything, and they just help. They help him rebuild. And again, that's a big thing in Finland, is this idea. Like, Sisu is a Finnish word that has no English analogue. You know, it is the idea of hope when there is no hope, courage in the face of insurmountable odds, the idea of just, you know, white knuckle grit. And it's really a core part of like sort of the Finnish national identity, this idea of holding on no matter what. And like, if you've read anything about World War II and the Winter War and, you know, what went on and stuff like that, I mean, it was fucked. There was that guy, there was a sniper who was called White Death. Samo Hayat, I think it is Hayat or something like that. You should look it up. I mean, it's one of those things where you're watching, where you're reading it, and it's like, why the fuck has there not been a film made about this guy? But yeah, I mean, again, this is it. Like, it's such, Sisu Road to Revenge is such good counter programming to Wicked, because we've got total maximalist, total just rah 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 right in your face. Here you have, again, a very over the top movie, but it's so much more elegant. It's so much more, simple, and allows for so much more tone and texture and light and dark and shadow, and just there's more in it than I got more out of Sisu Road to Revenge than I did the 2+ hours of Wicked for Good. And again, it's just my own personal kind of taste that, yes, I would gravitate towards an action movie. Yes, I would gravitate towards a film that is, a lot more kind of sharp and hewn and, fastened and kind of sharpened to an edge, And then here in the middle between the two is Christy. Now, right away, you're saying Christy, you're going to go to Sydney Sweeney, you're going to go to that fucking GQ interview. I mean, let's pause for a minute and talk about that. Like, oh my God, what an absolute clusterfuck of an interview. And, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, is that actors are so insanely guarded nowadays. There is such a, unwillingness to share even a moment of humanity, that when they are asked something as straightforward as, hey, this ad that you did recently, white supremacists took it on and felt that it was, kind of an embrace of eugenics and all the rest of it. How do you respond to that? What do you think about that? Would you like to kind of, knock that down a little bit? And because, again, this idea of actors are just so, and just celebrities generally, are so afraid of saying the wrong thing, of that wrong thing then going viral everywhere, and then their career just fucking, cratering as a result, leaves them to be completely devoid of normal human interaction and emotions. They'll just say anything to get out of it. And I mean anything as in anything that is inoffensive to anyone, anywhere, at any point in time. And, do I think Sydney Sweeney is a white supremacist or supports it tacitly? I don't fucking know. You wouldn't know anything from that interview. And I'm not knocking the GQ, the interviewer from GQ. I'm not knocking her either. Interviews at that level, with that much visibility on them, I would imagine the amount of hoops that they had to jump through, all the sort of questions, like the, what do you call them, prerequisites and pre-agreements that they have to make, I would say were fucking astronomical. And you can see she's trying to drive at something and is not getting there. Now, look, maybe that interviewer is probably better on paper than they are on camera. You know what I mean? That's a big thing. I know myself, personally, I always felt way more comfortable interviewing somebody and then taking the audio and just going away and writing up the interview, as opposed to having to do it on camera. I've never felt comfortable being on camera for anything at any time. I have to force myself to do stuff. Do you know that kind of way? But like, I'm bringing all this up, right? I'm bringing all this up because all of this, all of the kind of the discourse around Sydney Sweeney is ultimately more interesting than what's going on in Christy, because this is just a bang average, very, very by the numbers sports biopic. Mixed, tonally mismatched, rather, I should say, with a story of domestic violence and coercive control. And even that, in and of itself, the way that it's handled is, you know, like, it's all very worthy. Do you know what I mean? It's all very much a story told that has been done before, but it's a common story. And, you know, the real Christy Martin is now a big advocate for victims of domestic violence, and that's really important stuff. And I'm not trying to minimize any of it, but just when I was watching this, you know, it's a familiar tale, and it's done. It's not anything that hasn't been done before, and arguably done better. You know, like, again, like, even this, like, when it's just a straight boxing movie, it's Rocky. It is, you know, maybe not as broad and as sort of comic booky as Rocky is, but it's a boxing movie. You know what I mean? She started from nothing, trained really hard, found that she, you know, this was giving her a life and giving her a purpose, and that the discipline of it and the rules of it made sense to her, whereas the world outside had no rules, and that kind of, you know, conflict between the two. I mean, that's every boxing movie. That's nothing new, you know. The Fighter had that. You know, a lot of boxing movies, and just movies about MMA and fighting and all the rest of it, and combat sports or whatever you want to call it. That's a common story, you know. That's a common idea, and it's here. It's here in this, and it's done well. You know, that you know, it is told well, but then when it shifts over to the sort of coercive relationship that develops between Christy Martin and her husband, played by Ben Foster, again, it goes into a thing about, you know, the idea of we don't pay attention to the creeping, gnawing darkness that surrounds people until it's too late, and then it's right there. And, you know, Ben Foster, I think, is, you know, he's a really good actor. But, you know, he plays dirtbags in every film, and he's very, very good at it. But it's like, and he's playing a complete shitheel here as well. And the guy's dead now and good. And, you know, I was watching, I was like, yeah, he's great in this, but, like, is he stretching himself here? Like, is this not something he's done before? You know, the kind of way that the character is, you know, so easily and readily available to lie. Lance Armstrong, he did that before in Lance Armstrong in the program. The fact that he's like, kind of, you know, like a bully and really kind of almost pathetic in a way. You know, he's done that before as well. I mean, the only film I've watched Ben Foster be brilliant in and not play on something that he's done before and that he was doing something different was Hell or High Water. And he was brilliant in it. I think that was one of his best performances. I think that is his best performance to date, is him in Hell or High Water. And Sydney Sweeney, you know, again, there's an element to this that I was watching and I was like, I don't know how far away from Sydney Sweeney the person and this character there was, because they're both from, you know, Washington State. I think Christy Martin is from Spokane, or she's from Spokane, or one of, but like very rural, very deep red America, but, you know, has this sort of resilience to them and this belief that they can, you know, fight their way out, and they're, you know, hard scrabble and all the rest of it. And I was watching. I was like, okay, how much of this is a stretch for Sydney Sweeney? You know, men around her are very weird about her body and her femininity. She is just trying to be taken seriously and taken on her strengths and not on anything else. And, you know, has a cockiness and has a confidence that is studied in a way, but then kind of eventually gets in the way and puts her at a distance from other people. And you know, again, I can see why Sydney Sweeney probably wanted to do this, because she probably identified a lot with Christy Martin. And now we go into the whole thing about Ruby Rose, and Ruby Rose put this big Instagram post out saying that, you know, somebody like Sydney Sweeney, who is heterosexual, shouldn't have done this, because why should she get to play a hero of the LGBT community when she herself hates the LGBT community? And this, you know, I mean, this is an uncomfortable topic, because I don't think, and I could be wrong about this, and I'm prepared to be wrong about this, I don't think, and I'm not defending her, I'm not defending Sydney Sweeney. I think Ruby Rose has every right to state her opinion and state what she believes, and state the fact that, you know, this is a very important character. This is a very important person in the LGBT community, and it should have been played more reverentially. Perhaps, yes, by an actual bisexual person or a lesbian or whatever. You know, that's a whole other conversation. That, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's you know, there's a difference between equality and equity, you know, that kind of way. There's a whole thing there. And I mean, much smarter people with a lot more skin in the game, would be able to articulate that better than I ever could. I come back to the thing, though, of this was a very paint by numbers movie. It was good. It was fine. It is tonally mismatched. Sydney Sweeney, I thought, was good in it. I thought Ben Foster was good in it. I think David Micod or however you pronounce his name, I think he's one of those directors. Like, Animal Kingdom was so huge. And The King with Timothée Chalamet, not enough people saw that just because it was on Netflix. People kind of overlooked it, but it was a cracking film. I think, you know, I don't know if there was any way to make this film more cleanly than it was. It was very well executed, but there wasn't a lot in it. There wasn't anything to set this apart from countless other boxing movies and countless other movies about domestic violence, other than it being testimony, you know, as in a testimony of what that person has gone through and stuff. And, you know, her story is extraordinary, you know, that kind of way. What she did, the fact that she advanced the sport of boxing, made it mainstream, took it away from being a joke to being taken seriously. I mean, we wouldn't have Katie Taylor if it wouldn't for Christy Martin and stuff. So, like, her story is worthy of being told, for sure. Give me a documentary. I'm sure there's a documentary about Christy Martin and everything that happened. I would nearly say that would have been a better done than your bang average sports biopic. So there you have it. So that's my lot for this week. I'm going to keep it nice and short. Have not watched. I will watch Pluribus. A lot of people have been saying. No, really. A lot of people have been saying to me to watch Pluribus. Yes, I am going to watch it. Yes, I will sit down and watch it. In fact, when I'm done with this, I'm going to legally obtain the episodes of Pluribus, and I'm going to watch them legally. Yes, completely legally. Stranger Things 5. Going to be talking about that next week. That'll be interesting. Also going to be talking about Pillion. I saw that. Fucking hell. Jesus. Oh, that's a whole thing. Wow, that was a whole thing. Funny. Really funny film. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so that's my lot for this week. Hope you have a good rest of your week. Hope you enjoyed the show. Leave a comment, leave ratings, talk to me. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on TikTok, I'm wherever. Yeah, let me know how you're getting on. Let me know if you're enjoying the show. Let me know what you think about some of the movies. Have you gone to see any of the ones from last week? Did anyone go see Predator Badlands, by the way? Not enough fucking people went to see Predator Badlands. It was fantastic. I cannot talk enough about how good it is. Please go see it if you haven't seen it already. It is a cracker. Not enough people are talking about how fucking good that movie is. Loved it. Yeah, okay, I'm done. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Talk to you next time.